stumbles a little, and why doesn't always hit the same as the original game.
They were all dead. The final gunshot was an exclamation mark to everything that had led to this point. I released my finger from the trigger, and then it was over.
Before diving into the fall of Max Payne, let's briefly recap the events of the first game. Max Payne was a man with nothing left to lose. His wife and infant daughter were murdered, their deaths tied to a designer drug called Valkyr. A highly addictive narcotic flooding the streets of New York City. Seeking justice, Max transferred from the NYPD to the DEA, going deep undercover to expose the drug's source and hunt down those responsible. But the investigation took a dark turn. He got too close, was framed for murdering his fellow DEA agent Alex Balder, and suddenly found himself on the run, with both the police and the criminal underworld gunning for him. Max launched a one-man war against the Mafia, cutting through its ranks in search of answers. His search eventually led him to Mona Sachs, a contract killer he met in the gothic nightclub Ragnarok. She had her own reasons for revenge. The same man Max was after, Angelo Punchinello, had been married to her sister. Despite knowing better, he found himself drawn to her, though their paths were only briefly aligned. In his relentless pursuit of the truth, Max made an uneasy alliance with Vladimir Lenin, a sweet-talking Russian mobster who had his own agenda. With Vlad's help, Max carved his way to the heart of the criminal empire, only to realize that the corruption ran much deeper than the Mafia. The government was involved. A shadowy figure named Alfred Woden finally revealed the full extent of the conspiracy. Both he and the mastermind behind Valkyr, Nicole Horn, were members of a secret society known as the Inner Circle. Years earlier, while working for the district attorney's office, Max's wife had accidentally come across documents that exposed Horn's illegal operations. That mistake cost her her life. Now Woden offered Max a deal: kill Horn, get his revenge. In the end, Max got what he came for. He confronted Horn and entered the ring with a hail of bullets. But revenge wasn't victory. As the police surrounded him, he surrendered without resistance, knowing Woden would keep his promise. The charges would disappear, and his name cleared for the murder of Alex Balder. Max would walk free, but it wasn't over. He was still alive. His loved ones were still dead. And in the cold, empty streets of New York City, the pain remained.
God, I turned out to be such a damsel in distress.
They were all dead. Love kills. Did I love her? Was there a choice? The past is a gaping hole. You try to run from it. The more you run, the deeper, more terrible it grows behind you. Its edges yawn near your heels.
Like its predecessor, Max Payne 2 begins in media res, drawing you into the aftermath of a violent and tragic series of events before rewinding to show how it all unfolded. It begins on a stormy night at an unknown manor, with Max reflecting bleakly on everything that's happened, hinting at the deaths of several characters as the police swarm the area. But instead of rewinding to the very start, the game jumps back to a crucial turning point: Max awakening in the hospital, battered, bleeding, and accused of murdering his partner, Valerie Winterson. From there, it pulls us back even further back to the true beginning, unraveling the chain of violence, betrayal, and heartbreak that led him here. Just like before, the structure reinforces the idea that for Max, the cycle of pain and loss is inescapable, no matter how many times he tries to outrun it. Visually, Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne, is a step up from its predecessor, refining the gritty aesthetic of the first game, while incorporating new technology to make its world feel more immersive. While still set in the same bleak and crime-ridden New York City, the sequel's improved lighting, reflections, and particle effects makes its environments feel more atmospheric than ever. One of the biggest upgrades comes from the improvements to the Havoc physics engine, which changes the way objects react to the player and how NPCs behave during shootouts. Gone are the stiff and pre-scripted death animations of the original game. Now enemies crumple and ragdoll sort of realistically based on where they're shot, often crashing into objects or collapsing against walls. While this adds a new level of unpredictability to shootouts, it also leads to some hilariously unintended results. Bad guys getting flung into furniture, tumbling downstairs in awkward ways, or just flopping around like ragdolls on ice. But when combined with the smoother animations and the cinematic slow motion of bullet time, the game's action sequences still look stylish. Character models have also been improved. In the original Max Payne, Remedy had to work with a very limited budget, so they used their own staff, friends, and family as models, including lead writer Sam Lake as the face of Max Payne, giving us that now iconic and goofy grin. The lack of resources meant characters had somewhat stiff and expressionless faces, though this wasn't too distracting since the game relied on graphic novel-style cutscenes instead of in-engine cinematics. The sequel, with its larger budget, introduces a bit more variety in facial animations, making characters feel more expressive during both the graphic novel cutscenes and the occasional in-engine cutscene. Nowhere is this change more apparent than with Max himself. Remedy opted for a more professional approach this time around, and with a proper budget, Sam Lake's trademark smirk has been replaced by actor Timothy Gibbs, giving Max a more rugged, wore-down look that better fits his world-weary demeanor. Thankfully, James McCaffrey returns to voice Max, bringing back his signature gravelly narration and dry delivery that defines the character. Other returning characters have also been updated visually, most notably Mona Sachs, who now fully embodies the classic femme fatale archetype, modeled after actress and model Kathy Tong. Her new design gives her a more traditionally striking, sultry, and enigmatic presence, a perfect fit for the noir-inspired love story at the heart of Max Payne 2. It's a fitting evolution that aligns with the sequel's more serious tone, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss the slightly goofier, more unassuming look of the original cast. The first game had a unique charm, walking a fine line between parody and homage to film noir, while the sequel leans harder into its cinematic influences. It loses just a bit of that quirky, over-the-top personality that made the original so distinctive. The story is once again primarily told through graphic novel panels with voiceover narration, maintaining the series' signature style. However, Remedy expands on this format by incorporating more traditional cutscenes, adding more cinematic weight to certain scenes. While the first game drew heavy inspiration from Norse mythology and classic hard-boiled detective fiction, with a bit of John Woo's cinematic action sprinkled in, Max Payne 2 shifts its focus towards tragic love stories, embracing its film noir roots even more. The relationship between Max and Mona is at the heart of the narrative, and the visuals work hard to emphasize this, whether through moody lighting, provocative camera angles, or the way characters interact in moments of tension and intimacy. Overall, Max Payne 2 takes the foundation of its predecessor and elevates it, delivering a more visually refined and immersive experience. The improvement in physics, character models, and overall presentation make for a game that still holds up remarkably well.
Oh, detective, I've got something for you.
Max Payne 2 sticks to the same third-person shooter formula as its predecessor. Fast, brutal gunfights against an endless wave of enemies. Max's arsenal returns in full force, letting you wield everything from dual pistols to shotguns and assault rifles. Grenades and Molotovs also make a comeback, perfect for wiping out groups of enemies. Weapons and ammo carry over between levels, though Max occasionally loses his arsenal due to story-driven setbacks. Ammo is plentiful, keeping the action flowing, while painkillers remain your lifeline, allowing you to stock up to eat at a time. Like before, they don't work instantly, but gradually refill your health, forcing you to plan ahead instead of relying on heals mid-firefight. Where Max Payne 2 truly sets itself apart is how it refines the bullet time mechanic. In the original game, you had to earn every second of slow-motion combat by killing enemies to refill the meter, but in Max Payne 2, bullet time slowly regenerates on its own, removing the need to constantly rack up kills just to keep using it. Additionally, shoot dodging, Max's signature dive, no longer consumes bullet time, letting you fling yourself into gunfights without worrying about depleting your slow-motion reserves. A new system further changes the flow of combat. Killing enough enemies while in bullet time now turns the meter yellow, signifying that Max is fully locked in. At this point, enemies slow down even more, but Max moves at normal speed, making it easier than ever to dodge bullets, line up headshots, and clear roads. While it's a major improvement to gameplay, it comes at a cost: difficulty. So I didn't realize this until I read the comments of my Max Payne 1 review, but I unintentionally made the game way harder by not capping the frame rate. This broke the physics, shortened bullet time and shoot dodging, and turned the later levels into a brutal quick save marathon. After replaying the first game properly, it was still tough, but not as punishing. That said, it's still noticeably harder than Max Payne 2. Enemies in the sequel are aggressive, and certain encounters can be brutal, but the enhanced bullet time system gives players a massive advantage, especially on the base difficulty. Unlike the first game, where bullet time was a resource advantage, Max Payne 2 expects you to use it constantly. The ability to stay in the zone longer, move at full speed while enemies are trapped in slow motion, and regenerate bullet time naturally makes even the toughest fights far more manageable. Because of this, I barely use shoot dodging at all compared to the first game. Bullet time is so effective now, there's barely a reason to dive around like a maniac when you can just activate it and gun down enemies with pinpoint precision. Max Payne 2 isn't a total cakewalk. I still die plenty. But if you're looking for the same level of tension and methodical gunplay as the first game, hard-boiled mode is the way to go. Unlocked by beating the game once or using cheats. Hard-boiled mode removes the base game's adaptive difficulty, which secretly hands out extra ammo and painkillers if you die too often, and enemies will hit harder, making it the closest you'll get to replicating the challenge of the original. Even with these changes, shootouts in Max Payne 2 remain a satisfying experience. With all that out of the way, let's dive into the story.
When I woke up in the hospital earlier tonight, I thought it couldn't get any worse. I opened my eyes, and everything slid into focus. She was dead. I was hurt. My crime, what I had done, was like a hungry pit behind me. I had to run, get as far away from me as possible.
Max Payne 2 is set 2 years after the events of the first game. Thanks to Alfred Woden's influence, Max is back in NYPD as a homicide detective, cleared of any wrongdoing. But that hasn't erased the ghosts of his past. After the game's opening, the story rewinds to earlier that night. Max wakes up in a hospital bed, dazed and battered. He's alive, but he shouldn't be. His head pounds, the drugs clouding his thoughts. Disoriented, he stumbles out of bed, throws on his clothes, and makes his way through the eerily empty halls. Strange visions and distorted voices haunt him, remnants of trauma, both physical and emotional. A ringing phone snaps him back to reality. For a moment, he hallucinates the same message Nicole Horn left the night his family was murdered. Then, over the intercom, a doctor's voice reports that the detective brought in earlier was dead on arrival. That detective is Valerie Winterson, Max's partner. He killed her, or he thinks he did. The hallucinations make it ambiguous at first. Pressing forward, Max finds a janitor lying lifeless on the floor. Before he can process the scene, an armed man steps in, radioing someone. He's here to kill Max. But Payne is faster. One squeeze of the trigger and the assassin drops before he gets a chance to fire. Moving cautiously, Max reaches the hospital's reception area and steps into an elevator, hoping for a clean escape. No such luck. When the doors slide open, he's met by his boss, Lieutenant Jim Bravura, who immediately starts throwing accusations. The NYPD believe Max killed Winterson. Before he can even respond, Bravura is suddenly gunned down in front of him. A split second later, a bullet ruptures an oxygen tank, triggering an explosion that rips through the adjacent elevator. Somehow, Max survives. Climbing through the wreckage, he makes his way to the morgue where he stands over Winterson's body. It's real. He did kill her. And now someone else is coming for him. But this wasn't really the beginning. The scene shifts again, taking us back to the previous night. A call comes in, shots fired at a warehouse owned by Max's former ally turned semi-legitimate businessman, Vladimir Lem. Part of the Russian mob, he briefly appeared in the first game, joining forces to fight their mutual enemy, the Vancello crime family. Without hesitation, Max responds and races to the scene. As he arrives, Max calls in for backup after hearing the distant echo of gunfire and screams inside the warehouse. Sneaking inside, the sounds weren't exactly what he expected. Turns out the eerie sounds are just the TV, playing the latest episode of Dick Justice. While Max Payne 2 dials back the sillier parody elements woven into the first game's narrative, he makes up for it with a lineup of fictional in-game TV shows. Each one cleverly references events from both Max Payne and its sequel, blending them with different TV genres and settings.
Big Bird Mental Institute. There's men pretended to be hospital wardens.
I think I died. I think I'm dead. I don't know.
The first you'll come across after leaving the hospital is Address Unknown, a Twin Peaks-inspired mystery thriller about a man hunting the killer who murdered his wife. Then there's Dick Justice, a crime drama mixed with elements of Shaft and other blaxploitation movies. Lords and Ladies takes a more dramatic turn, parodying Victorian-era soap operas, while Captain Baseball Bat Boy, a cartoon that had its comic strips appear in the first game, makes a return in animated form. Further in the warehouse, Max runs into a man claiming to be a cleaner, hired to tidy up the place. The guy is immediately suspicious as he casually brings up that there's a gun workshop upstairs, like it's an ordinary thing for a warehouse to have. Unsurprisingly, the guy is dirty, pulling a gun on Max the second he has his back turned. After taking him out and his buddy nearby, it's clear that this isn't a break-in. It's a hit job. Working his way deeper into the warehouse, Max will fight more cleaners and find several dead bodies until he stumbles upon two cleaners holding a woman at gunpoint. She's Annie Finn, the gunsmith that works for Vlad. before Max can intervene, they execute her. As Max continues clearing the warehouse, he's reunited with a ghost from his past, Mona Sachs.
Come on. Finally. Hey. Mona?
Max, we gotta stop meeting like this.
Unfortunately, it's a brief reunion. Mona vanishes as quickly as she appeared. Max cuts through the last of the cleaners before rushing outside, just in time to see a black van trying to escape. He tries to stop it, but nearly gets run over in the process. His life saved at the last second by the arrival of his partner, Valerie Winterson. Valerie is Max's complete opposite, a straight-laced cop who follows the book to the letter. She's a far better detective than him by his own admission. There are hints later on that she might have had feelings for Max, but nothing ever came of it. Beneath her tough exterior, she's a caring woman, raising her disabled blind son alone while balancing the pressures of her job. Regardless of how it